Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Destination Big Leagues. In today's episode, I've got my dear friend, Saif Rana. Saif Rana is the co founder of AILAR, an edtech company, and Codo's Launchpad, basically a SaaS platform where people can come in and start their SaaS platforms within 24 hours. So, hey, Saif, thanks for coming to the podcast. I met you at Codo's HQ where I gave a talk on LangChain, and we actually had a pretty interesting conversation on EdTech. So I thought to get you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming. Would you want to quickly introduce yourself? I know you've done a lot. So, yep.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ronak. First of all, really excited to be here and to continue the discussions that we've had as well. It was quite exciting. Yeah, been working in edtech for over 13 years, various different companies. Started off with my father's company. We developed that out. That spawned a few other companies as well. And then decided in November 2022 to go into the AI space and do something in edtech with AI after a realization that I had. And yeah, involved in quite a few initiatives and companies that are multinational. So there's quite a lot. But if you want to boil it down to the broad strokes, graduated first class with honors, electronic and electrical engineering in 2016, and then yeah, went on to be involved in many different companies since then. So excited to be here, excited to discuss with you and the team about edtech and a few of the things that will be coming up that I'm sure well, we can get into that.
Right. So you mentioned, right, your dad was in edtech and kind of followed his roots, got into edtech as well. Why did you decide to go to edtech, right? Like, what is the purpose? What is the calling to get into edtech?
Yeah, that's actually well. How much time have you got? I could be speaking for quite a while on this.
Uh,
So, no, yeah. So, with the edtech company, my father also graduated electronic and electrical engineering, and he's a programmer, Oracle database engineer. Worked on quite a few significant projects in the UK, contracting and such. And it was around 2009 when he first started developing products for a business venture that he started with some of his colleagues. And the evolution of that is that it developed into a tool that the hospitals and was also well suited to education as well. And as that company launched, it basically found its market within the education sector. And then that was when they specialized into it, they launched a specific company based just around edtech to continue developing on that side of things. So that was kind of how that company came into formation. For myself personally, about the passion of edtech, I'm someone who has benefited quite a lot from education. It's made a significant difference to my life, and also from teachers who didn't give up on me as well. I've mentioned this on quite a few other podcasts, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. But yeah, I used to struggle. Teachers gave me a chance. They showed empathy and things like that. They took the time with me, and I was able to improve and not just catch up, but also excel as well. So that's kind of where the passion for edtech comes in, and then my father's company, and then going through university and helping out whenever I could, doing a year in industry over there, going on to work there after I graduated. It really did build that passion because I was able to see, okay, I'm making a difference. I can have an idea on Monday, have something built by Thursday, launch it the next Monday, and then before you know it, you've made a real significant difference, and you can see how that difference is, in the classroom through the feedback that you get. So it's something that I found very rewarding, and it's my way of giving back and helping people in a way that I was also helped, which made a difference to my life.
Right. I mean, the passion on your knowledge in edtech definitely radiates. We've had that conversation before, and
Yeah,
so kind of lay the groundworks of what is edtech. I mean, I think everyone's familiar about edtech,
yeah,
but edtech is seeped into even traditional university education so deep. Lay the groundworks of kind of what the edtech space is, what the opportunity is, and yeah, you know.
yeah. So we've got EdTech stands for education technology. So you could classify it as anything which is used to assist a teacher in lesson delivery or a student in learning whatever subject it is that they're trying to learn, whatever goal it is that they're trying to attain. So, in a nutshell, that's edtech. Now, that covers a very broad terminology. There's quite a few things that could come underneath that, but there's three main sectors or categories that edtech products fall into. They're either hardware, software, or content. So they fall into that. In terms of the makeup of exactly what the percentage is, roughly 41% of the market is based in hardware. 25% is based in software, so tools that you would use to assist with your lesson delivery, and then 34% is based on content. Maybe PowerPoint presentations, or so you get so many games and things like that that you can use, that really assist that kind of gamification style of teaching. So that's what it breaks down into. In terms of the market size, edtech's huge. One conservative report from 2021 placed the edtech market at roughly around 74.2 billion, and that same report predicts that it's going to increase to $224.8 billion by 2031. So within 10 years, more than doubling, the size of the addressable market. So edtech's huge. It's something which it's quite interesting to see how it's evolved, how the content side and sectors have come out, how the hardware has come out. I was fortunate enough when we were speaking about, my father's company, is that we actually caught a bubble. When everyone had the projector based systems and they started going to the LED based systems, we actually caught that at the right time, and we entered the market at the perfect time when that was really starting off. And it's been really interesting to see how it's evolved over time, and then also seeing how laws and regulations have affected edtech as well. This is something that not a lot of people maybe put as much emphasis on, but geopolitics does come into play and can really help inform you to make the best quality business decisions that you can make, especially when it comes to education, because there's so much regulation and safeguarding, and there's been so many landmark landmark laws that have been passed, I would say, in the time since 2010.
Right. So, what is the purpose of edtech, right? Because a lot of discussions going on of what the value proposition of university is, right? Especially in the West, right?
Yeah.
Kids obtaining their education from the U.S. or the U.K., you're paying upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The cost benefit analysis, the cost benefit just doesn't add up. Like, so is edtech supposed to be a supplement to the traditional education ecosystem, or is it supposed to be a new alternative path where people can go learn a course on XYZ platform and then obtain a skill and then go out there in the workforce and obtain a reasonably well
Yeah.
paying job?
Well, this is a really interesting question, and there's so many different ways that it could be answered. Um, what I would say is that the value in edtech is helping to accelerate teaching. And true teaching is done through empathy. I mean, me and you spoke about this at length at the podcast. I mean, I'm sorry, at the Langchain event where we attended. But the empathy comes down to the core of learning is empathy. When there's empathy, that's when the realizations happen. There's a saying that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. In that you can supply a student with absolutely everything that they need, but until there's the want there, until you've sort of opened them up, and they're committed to it, the information isn't going to sink in or isn't going to stay. You're not going to get the same level of engagement, and they're not going to get the same quality of learning out of it. So in terms of just the technology and what it does in its current form, for the majority of education and the edtech market, it's based around assisting with teaching massively, teaching in organized in-person events. There has been quite a few solutions that have come out which have focused more on the remote learning side of things, and that's that's maybe a conversation we'll come on to. But in terms of just the core beings of it, it comes down to just this is what where this is what the teacher needs to learn, this is what the student needs to learn, sorry, and this is how we're helping the teacher to learn it. In terms of, as you said, the idea of edtech growing and replacing universities, there's quite a lot of online schools, there's like U Certify and many others, there's online universities as well, actually, which are proponents of technology, where they're spreading out knowledge and people can sign up and learn to it, go there and learn. And what I think is a key differentiator is that you have self-taught learning and then you have structured learning. Structured learning is required by law up until you're like 18 or 16, depending where you are in the world. And that sector is not going to go anywhere, unless everyone decides that no one by law has to go to school. It's always going to be there, but it does give an interesting conversation, and to the use cases of you know education which isn't compulsory, which isn't mandated by law. Can people be self-taught and things like that? I would say that in markets where there's heavy regulation, or there's a specific a process to go through, such as if you want to become a medical doctor, or if you want to become a dentist, or an architect, a lawyer, things like this, you will struggle to the opportunity for edtech to replace the sort of structured learning platforms as we know them today, is very limited. But with things such as coding and programming, and like, look, we could look at Coders HQ. That's something which replaces, I would say, it's actually ahead of the curve when it comes to learning that you get in universities and things like that, because it's able to adapt quickly, and it's able to, I mean, some at the workshop that we were at, you guys were teaching stuff that had only been announced the week before. You're not going to get that level of flexibility at a university course. So I think it comes down to, on an individual use case, what is the demand for um not going down the structured path, and I think that the demand lies with how many people are wanting to become entrepreneurs, and business owners or founders, such as that, because they're the type of people that require the information imminently. And because they require it imminently, in order to capitalize on whatever opportunities that they have, or whatever value proposition that they're trying to deliver. For that reason, I think that as they grow in number, you will see more and more edtech companies which are being released, which are directly tutoring the students on specific use cases. I have no doubt that a lot of the online universities are, and the online learning organizations, as we mentioned before, are actually working on this side of things, to improve, the possibility of bringing in AI, because obviously they have masses of resource banks that they can train people on, and then obviously that then lends itself to transpose across to other related fields, you could say. So yeah, I mean, could edtech replace universities? Maybe. For a particular type of person, yes. In a particular type of use case, definitely. Will it replace the structured learning as we've got so far, the compulsory learning? I don't think so, because at the ages that education is compulsory, what you have is the core of the learning isn't in the actual, I would say, the actual core information that they're being given. The core in of the learning is actually, how do you interact with people, how do you work as part of a team, how, all of the social skills, the social soft skills that they need to learn, to be able to integrate well and to be able to become a success after school. That's where the core of it is, and it's not something that you're going to get if you replace that out and you put an AI or a robot in charge. So it's actually very interesting, this question, because I was asked it at a meeting that I had with Nvidia. ILA's part of Nvidia Inception program, and I've also had this conversation with a lot of teachers as well, where they said that, oh, AI in education, so are you gonna build something that's gonna replace us or something? And my answer to them has been no, because it comes down to the emotion, it comes down to the empathy. It's not solely on lesson delivery. And then when you look at, like I said, the politics of it, like the safeguarding that you have to do, there's been so much laws in terms on regulations that have been brought in on safeguarding education in so many countries. The majority of countries now have safeguarding regulations that you wouldn't have, anywhere else. That you wouldn't have before 10 years previous, and that is something which I think you cannot fully replace by AI. You need the structure of a physical institution that children can attend with. And as you know, like them soft skills are what makes a difference after you leave school. I think a good case in point is actually, a lot of people that attend school and then they go on to become successes outside of academia. There's many that we could point to. Richard Branson's the most famous one. The founder, CEO of Virgin, and it shows that even though he might have struggled in a schooling structure, he would have still, whilst he was there, been interacting with people. There would have been something outside of what the core academia would have promised him that would have picked up, that he then took, nurtured, and developed, took further, and then eventually became someone who launched this massive empire. So teaching is so much more than just the information, I would say.
Right. I think you made a lot of good points. Like I think if you just compare it from a product basis, right, the traditional education path and the edtech learning path, right, and the thing that you kind of mentioned, right, the most important thing about education is empathy, right, and it is so important to have empathy while inculcating young folks with knowledge, because
Yep.
everyone's a different type of learner, right? You might be an auditory learner, a visual learner, a reading writing learner, or kinesthetic learner. So there's that classification as well. And in order to inculcate knowledge into young individuals, it's on the behest of the teacher to understand and identify kind of what kind of student it is, And what often happens is, a teacher in a traditional education sense shows attention to maybe the top 5% of the class, which gets all the praises, all the applauds, and they succeed, and the rest kids might have some attention paid, but the bottom 20%, who the teacher can't identify what their sort of skill sets are completely left back, and don't really have a good time in school, right? You also mentioned that you were super privileged in a sense where your teachers had empathy for you in spite of you struggling, and that's why you succeeded in an education, so do you think, like, when you compare it in terms of product, right? Because okay, with human beings, right, we always have a certain bandwidth of empathy, right? Like there might be so much atrocity going around the world, but we can only be empathetic to a certain amount of people around us, right? It becomes harder as you go further away from the food chain to kind of have empathy for people. I think the teachers are the same way as well. I think it's not their fault, it's just how human beings are configured. So when you compare it in a product basis, leaving regulations aside, right, the structured education and the edtech education, right, and now with the proliferation with generative AI, do you think these AI systems would kind of be more sophisticated to kind of understand how we human beings learn through tracking our various study patterns, and than a traditional teacher?
Yeah, I want to be careful how I answer this because I don't want to reveal too much information before I'm ready to for ILAR. So there's a little hint there and a little smile. So technology and empathy. Well, empathy comes when you have time. Technology can buy us time. This is something which, when you have the time to do something well and you care enough, you will perform an action with a level of excellence to it. You will really take note of the small details and small little ticks. Now, one thing which is unfair to the teachers is that they may have to take five classrooms, they may have to take five classes in a day, and each of them classes has 30 students. That's 150 students, and the classes will be like, well, they're meant to be an hour, but in practicality they're less than an hour. By the time all the students get in, they sit down, do the register, pack up, etc., etc., it's actually less than an hour. So you're looking at it, they've got to do all the content delivery, they've got to mark the student works, they've got to, go ahead and, assess how each student is doing, pay attention. How much can you really expect someone to do? The teacher at the start of the day, if they've had a good night's sleep and a good night's rest, they're going to be able to give more attention and be able to perform better than at the end of the day. And then that puts the students that are at the end of the day at a disadvantage. That isn't to say there's anything wrong with the teacher. It's like that at any job. When you look at performance throughout the day and KPIs and how they, fluctuate throughout the day, you understand that the longer someone's working at something and the more workload you're going to put under them, there's a point of diminishing returns. So with AI, how can that affect that? How can that impact that in education? It's about moving out the legwork. A teacher in a class has to perform the same action 30 times. It has to mark the students work 30 times, and then the teacher then has to go ahead and see how that feeds into a lesson plan. So they have to see exactly how the student is performing. How are all the students performing as a collective? How does that tie in with what it is that they're doing, what it is that they're trying to teach the student? And then it impacts their plans on the next lesson. How can you expect them to do that, to a high an exceptionally high standard, when there's so many other things that come into it? That's not even mentioning the fact that they'll have all these regulations that they have to do. They might have to, students have specific needs that they have to cater toward, and then the fact that teachers also have lives as well. Anything can happen in their personal lives, but yet they're expected to, go home and spend all of their evenings, preparing for the next lesson, marking the students' work, and then feeding all this information. It's a lot of data. So I think that the role of AI, the role that it can play right now, which is at its best, is getting down that potential, that workload, getting that workload down, and helping to automate that and to really accelerate the teacher. What I've seen with teachers that are using ILA is that they generally they keep saying the same thing to me, which is that if you can save us time, these are the things that we are using that are taking up time. So if you can save us time, we can put that time back into the students.
Right.
And they start using the systems, they get used to it, they become proficient in using our systems. And then what happens is they end up coming back to us and saying to us, they're like, okay, you've given us this time, can your system do XYZ, for example, produce some particular type of content or whatever it is, and that would really help us, because then we can put that into our lesson and like really increase the production value. Me and you were actually talking about this earlier on about you know um production value versus output and consistency and things like that, and this was in the term of just live streaming and podcasting equipment and things like that, just before we got started. And teachers have had consistency for a very long time. What I want is for them to be able to put on more and more engaging lessons, and that requires to save time from elsewhere so they can devote it into this region, so this area. So yeah, when we're speaking about in terms of just when we're speaking in terms of just how AI and Gen AI can help the teachers, I think it's getting down the time that they spent, you know get preparing the lessons, not actually with the lesson delivery. I think we have to leave that to the teachers for now. I think that Gen AI can do a lot of things with lesson delivery, but because of the amount of regulations that are involved and the safety safeguards that would have to be in place, and because it's not as if it's just like a one-to-one thing, it's a one-to-many. You've got 30 students in a classroom, average size of a classroom is 30. So what is it, you know how are you going to make sure that you're not infringing upon anything, or the system isn't infringing upon anything? And you have things like biases involved as well. So to the point that you mentioned about the teacher might focus on the best and not necessarily, I tend to find that it's all the from the teachers having a heavy workload, all the students suffer from that, because it's the capacity of the teachers inherently, they're wonderful people and they want to help every single student, and all their students matter to them. And it's one thing that I hear over and over again, over 13 years in edtech. And I can't tell you how many times I can say that teachers really do care about their students, and they'll do amazing things for their students as well. And there was one teacher that I know that learned programming in order to make a script that could help them out, with some of the lesson delivery that they were doing a number of years ago. So teachers go above and beyond, and they really do care. The problem is time, because time is not allowing them to do a high enough quality job. And that's what Gen AI should focus on right now. It shouldn't focus on replacing teachers, because that's something which is very dangerous, that we need to um, I don't think there's any benefit to replacing teachers also, simply because me and you have spoken quite a lot on empathy. you know Empathy with a human is different than getting empathy from an avatar, or such an AI system, or such a robotic system. And that would impact, I think, students, and we don't yet know how that would impact students. So I don't think it should even be in the conversation when we're talking about compulsory education. When we're talking about non-compulsory education, so for example, if someone wanted to launch an AI school or an AI online teaching platform where someone could learn, that's very different, because now it is about the information and how you can apply it. A lot of the people that attend Coders HQ events, they're looking for general information and how they just want the information and how to apply it, and that's it. They figured out what it is that they want to do, and they have an idea, a plan that they're putting in action. So to a certain extent, outside of compulsory education, there may be a case for that. If there is an audience which specifically all they want is just the education market, the education side of things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty well said, right? Uh, so, I mean, you there are like, we can kind of diversify. I mean, classify education into kind of three sectors, right? Primary, middle school, secondary, and then well, the fourth one being university, right? I personally believe that in the primary and middle school, and to a certain extent secondary as well, the human teacher connection is super important, right? Especially in your fundamental ages, right? More than imparting knowledge, it's imparting that human emotion, that human connection, right? Because we're all communal creatures, and students tend to spend their formative years like at least like 7 or 8 hours a day in school, and having good teachers is super important. So that's one aspect. Um, Talking about universities, right? Uh, Primary, middle school, and secondary still relatively affordable, right? The jump in cost really steps up when you go to university, right? Like, uh, right, in the US and in the UK, it's hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands of dollars, right? Wherever you live, right? Universities is a pretty expensive endeavor. Plus all the top universities like Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Yale, all of these people have their courses, right? Basically, their content, their knowledge is commoditized. What is the value proposition for some young child who's making the decision to, spend hundreds and thousands of dollars, potentially go into debt to, go to these universities, as opposed to sort of, self-learning, self-pacing it on his own, and, uh,
Yeah, that's again. I'll be careful how I answer this. Just in terms of, I've got quite a few universities, well, clients of mine, that I'm sure will be watching this. Um, it depends on what it is that you want to do. First of all, whether you should go to university or not. There's certain paths in life that are only available to you if you go to university, such as I mentioned before. If you want to become a medical doctor, or
right.
dentist, lawyer, whatever it is, that's one thing. Okay, the second thing is that what is your attitude going to be when you're going to university? um University is very, I actually talked to my father quite a lot about what university was like for himself when he went, and then what my experiences were at university. University, there's a lot more people that are attending than before. So what you have to bear in mind is that you need to make sure that, because there are more and more people that are qualifying with degrees, you need to make sure that you're making the most out of it, and also you're spending such a significant amount of money. I know lots of people who left university with, 60,000 pound worth of debt, over 60,000 pound worth of student loans debt, and they didn't get any job in the profession that they wanted. They actually got a job that they could have potentially got straight out of high school. Such was the competition, and that they were up against. But university keeps, it what you get out of it is what you put in is what you're going to get out of it, and it's something which you have to look at on a case by case basis. I've had people come up to me at various community centers that I'm at and ask me the same advice, saying to me that I'm thinking of going to university. What is it that you think that I should do? And the truth is that there's not one rule that fits all. Everyone has their own circumstances. But what I often do is I get them to get to the point where they understand what it is that they want to do with the next 5 years of their life, and where is it that they want to be in the next 10 years of their life. And the answers to these two things really do help frame up exactly what it is that they're potentially going, what the answer would be. So for example, like some people come up to me and they say to me that I want to become an entrepreneur, or I want to have a few companies and I want to do XYZ. Okay, what companies do you want to do? I want to have this company and this company and this company and such and such. Okay, are you not interested in a career path whatsoever? No, I'm not. Okay, that's fine. So then these are, resources that you can use, that you can go through this course, and you can look at it, online, free information that you can find online. Online is actually really good for information like this. You can get a lot of the content that you need, online. Go through that, have a look at that, try launching a few businesses, try a few ideas, learn from it. And if you feel that there's still a deficit in your knowledge, then go to university, because university isn't going anywhere. You can apply to it after 2 years. To be honest, when I was at university, I had people that were like me, like 18 years old, straight into university in the UK. And then I also had people in the course that were like 65 years old. They
Okay.
were just, they wanted to try something else. They retired from one career and they wanted to learn something else. So we had a wide range. And there's one thing that I realized whilst I was at university, that, oh, wait a minute, maybe I could have taken a little bit of time, and maybe, looked at a few different options, beforehand. So this is what I mentioned to people, that university isn't going anywhere. It's about the timing and how much effort you're going to put in. I actually feel that, people should mature up at university, because a lot of people tend to go to university but they haven't fully matured. As such, they don't maximize it for what it was that they could have got out of it. There's a lot of effort, that, you know, I'm sure, Ronak, if you were to go back to university today, and the same is true for myself, that, you would have handled it very differently. You sort of realize after you've left that, wait a minute, this is what I could have done. But hindsight, 2020, isn't it? You always look back on things and you be like, this is where I could have, handled it better. So it is a
100%.
significant commitment. And what I say to people is that you don't want to go to university and then have, 5 figures worth of debt. And as you said in your case, in some areas of the world, there's 6 figures worth of debt. And you have no realistic way of being able to pay that off, or it hasn't benefited you in any meaningful way. It hasn't contributed to the journey that you're on. So when it comes down to university, it's something like, everyone has to see what's best for them, and take a look at it. For the entrepreneurial path, it's, if people are more geared towards, startups and things like that, try a few companies beforehand before you go pick out a university course. It might be that you through starting a few companies, or trying a few different things, you can increase your network. And you never know, you might have a really outstanding application that you can actually put together, that would actually get you into a better university that might be more useful, for what it is that you want to do. Because it isn't just about, it's not as if university is just like one quality. There's varying levels of quality and education that you get. You don't want to be going for somewhere where it's not, you're going to be paying the same, but you're not going to be getting the same amount of value out of it. So these are things to consider. Um but yeah, I mean, the rise of free learning platforms, and platforms that are leveraging the sort of online learning are, increasing day by day. And I think that it's becoming interesting to view how the shift is, going from higher education more into more practical forms. I think the last few years has really made a big difference, because you have to look at it. Universities, people were paying a lot of money, they were going there, they were able to network with peers, create links which that they would be able to keep for life, and the association within the university. But all of a sudden, when COVID came around, that was taken away. Everyone's, sat at home, just online learning, and then what is the value that you can truly deliver? What is the experience that you can truly deliver if you just, sat there? So it's very interesting to see how it's going to develop, especially with AI coming out. We touched on this earlier on with the use case of people bringing out AI coming out, and is it going to be used in education and things like that. One thing that I find really interesting is in the UAE, they are actively promoting in the universities for their students to use AI. Whereas in the UK, it's much more limited. And it's something which I think is Pandora. I mean, it's something that it's a box that's been opened and it's not going to go back in. It's really difficult to detect if AI has been used accurately. Difficult to detect, because, to be honest, if something's in the training data, then it will always think that it's AI generated, and a few other different aspects which add up to that. So it comes down to, you know workshops are providing more value for people that are in the AI space or wanting to get into the SaaS space and things like that, because they're up to date. And universities are a little bit behind the curve on that side of things. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this space develops, because, Ronak, as well as I do, every week in AI there's at least three significant announcements which completely change how it is that you're going to do something. How you would go about complete workflows get changed, because there's another better way to do it, and if you don't implement it, your competitors are going to have an advantage over you. So it's going to cause very interesting evolution of education, and it's going to be extremely interesting to actually watch how that develops, and how universities are going to respond to it.
Right. No, I mean, yeah, I think really good points out there. So, you actually, I never even thought about it, right? When you kind of mentioned the classifications of kind of the edtech landscape, I didn't even think of hardware as a component. And I know that your company deals with hardware. It just slips off. When you think about edtech, you think about platforms like Khan Academy, EDX,
Mm,
Udemy, So there's hardware. You said there's content, and then there's software, right? Let's say I'm a young entrepreneur, really passionate about education, right? In the post-generative AI world, and I was trying to sort of get into creating a tech startup. What are the market opportunities? What are the least barrier to entry things that I can start building within the edtech space to, create a company?
yeah. um EdTech is ultra competitive. You're dealing with education systems that often run on tight budgets that are often underfunded. So it's ultra competitive. So what you need to find is a product which first, or a service that you can deliver, which first of all allows you to run at low cost, and is something which you can build in margin, which will be eaten away as longer the longer that time goes on. There is a constant need in edtech to completely reinvent yourself. you know um it can very quickly devolve to, as we say in sales, a race to the bottom. Something comes out is brand new, that's fine. You maybe get yourself, up to a year a head start. Everyone else catches up. Now, you're in a feature war. Now all the features have standardized, and you can't grow the product anymore because it will add infinite amount of complexity, and you wouldn't get any new, student. You wouldn't get any new customers because it's so complex. There's a barrier to entry that you end up creating. So now you've reached the limit on the amount of features that you can add, and then the entire market's like that. Now it becomes an all-out price war, a race to the bottom. So when you're starting off, you need to focus very heavily on something which you can support, an idea that you can support, which bears in mind that you're going to be going into an ultra competitive pricing environment, and you need to make sure that the value that you're delivering far outweighs the price that people would be paying. This is how you can, um, edtech's education is a very funny sector in that there's a lot of long-standing relationships that have been built up for decades and decades and decades. And although you're making products for teachers, you're not selling to teachers, you're selling to the heads of schools or the head of a diocese, or a multi-academy trust or something, someone who's looking at it from a very different viewpoint to what a teacher is looking at it for. So what happens is that along that journey you can actually become skewed and start making products for the people that are making the purchasing decision, but they're not actually the people that are going to be using the product. So it's something that you have to be very wary of when you're getting into edtech. I would say that if you're going to be looking for, inroads, um, hardware is very hardware is tricky. I mean, I've been doing hardware for a number of years. In the background, I know it's blurred out on my screen. You can see one of the screens that I've developed a number of years ago, and interactive large format displays. And what you find is that if you're going to go into hardware, you need to have a support structure which allows you to service products immediately. The downtime in a classroom is significant, so if you're going to have more than even to have a device down for an hour, which is used every single day, which is a core component that the entire class is built around, that's something which will lose you a teacher and lose you a teacher forever, because that's now one class which is behind. And you know how we said with the AI, the teachers are constantly in a race. Well, if they can't deliver the class that they've planned, all of a sudden they're now in a race to try to catch up throughout the year, to try to steal time in order to deliver that lesson content. And that has a knock-on effect to their workload, to things that they're doing. It adds the pressure up, it ramps the pressure up massively. So if you're going to go into hardware, I would say that you need to have a well thought out support structure before you enter that in edtech, because that will be catastrophic to your reputation, and it will damage you significantly if you do not have that. So it then comes down to, if you're looking at just an entrepreneur starting off, it comes down to two sectors, and it comes down to whether you want to do the content or the software. um, Content is heavily saturated, and what you have to understand is that you're dealing with, what you're going up against is people who have years and years of insight. um, you know some of the people that are running some of these content platforms, they've got over 40 years teaching experience. Well, the majority of them are 30 to 40 years in. They've got that significance in there, and they're also aware of all of the policies that are being passed with education, and what it is that schools are trying to do with education, specifically. So they're always ahead of the curve. So getting into content becomes quite difficult if you don't have an inroad, and also if you don't have a person that can champion your content. That becomes very difficult, because why would they pay for your content? Also, you have to look at a lot of schools actually standardize the content that people deliver and use. So I wouldn't say that for that reason. And then finally, we come to software. Software is something where if you can find the right problem to fix, you can implement it, and you can implement it in a way that can scale. If you use the SaaS model, then you're always going to be cash flow positive, which makes it difficult to crack into a market. Now, if you have aspirations for going into hardware, what I would say is that, what is a hardware product that you're building? Is there a software component to that? Can you sell the software component first separately in order to build yourself up to the position where you can now, produce a hardware product? Because you would need to be able to support the hardware product. There's an entire infrastructure that you have to build around with hardware, whereas with software, you know you could build it in your bedroom, essentially. And a lot of the issues that you would face with scaling and things like that as long as you're using a service that you could sign up to, Microsoft for startups, for example, where ILA's a part of. AWS Activate, also ILA's a part of that. You've got all these startup accelerators that you can make use of, which can really help with the scaling aspects of what it is that you're trying to do. So, in terms of insights, young entrepreneur wants to get into edtech, I would say look into software, because it might take you a few tries to find the right problem to fix. What you don't want to do is find a fix and then look for build a fix and then look for a problem, because that's not going to get you anywhere. So, think about it the other way around. Have a few tries at it, and keep persevering as well. The amount of successful businesses and ventures that I've had, from failed successful, well, I would call them failed, they weren't failed, they just evolved. You pivot, you realize that, oh, okay, this hypothesis was wrong, but over here I've learned, ABC was wrong. I thought ABC was right, and there would be a viable business I could grow over there. But XYZ is about, in the process of ABC, I've learned XYZ, and XYZ is something that's going to work. And then you end up pivoting into XYZ, for example. So that's my advice on that level.
Right. I just want to put a little bit pushback on the content side, right? So you said a lot of content is heavily saturated, which is definitely true. And, a lot of people in the content game are
Mm,
like legacy people, right? Like people who are tenured, 20, 30 years of experience. But, you know,
veterans,
I-
yeah.
yeah, but I see that, if I were to like consider one of the largest tech platforms, I would probably say it's YouTube. It's free. There's just so much content out there in YouTube. And I've noticed that a lot of people, young content creators as well, having like trading channels or like how to make money through like blockchain or all these different niche content, which is relatively new, sort of creating courses and being able to monetize and doing super well. What do you think about those opportunities, teaching niche courses which are quite new and monetizing it on a paywall, using YouTube as a distribution platform to gain audience?
Yeah, I mean, that's viable. That again is falling more outside the ideas of traditional education. The
Right.
traditional education structure, is something that's taken off. So, it comes down to how consistent are you. Well, it comes
Right.
in general, but as me and a lot of people that are on social media platforms, such as myself and yourself as well, we understand that the social media side is basically just a gateway to what it is that you want the person to actually do. It's kind of like a side mission, where like, this is, you get some value over here, and then you're gonna then shift them over and say, but and then you're capturing the value elsewhere. So in the examples that you do, people that are like, for example, YouTubers that are giving away free courses, and then they have a paid course, or maybe a book, or something, some Patreon, some kind of additional service that they send people to, is basically a gateway that moves them onto the other side. So if you're able to create a successful model and go viral enough, then yeah, why not do it? Anyway, where in order to make money, you've got to make something that's valuable. You're not gonna.
Exactly.
No one ever pays for something that they don't view as valuable.
Right.
you know what so if you can affect that side of it, then yeah, cool. But when you're looking at education, one thing that I've noticed is that there's not a lot of, I could say, like, education content that's geared specifically for teachers or establishments online. It's actually notoriously quite light in that regard, on education. I think there's I tried looking for a podcast on teaching where there's teachers and things like that. I think there was only like two or three that I found that had like over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. But this was a while ago when I checked. But this was like maybe, over a year ago. So wherever it is that you can find a gap in content. I mean, if you're going to, for example, start, a course on AI, you've got the entire, you've got basically the majority of programmers on YouTube jumping on that. So now, how do you win the SEO race? And then how long can you continue to support that? Yourself. I mean, a lot of the people, I mean, from your framing, it's more like, the young person who doesn't have a lot of responsibilities. They've got time. There isn't that necessarily the need for quick money, as opposed to someone else who might be, later on in life, maybe they're married or they've got kids, they've got an apartment that they're paying for, things like this. So they need to figure out that side of things, so for them. But, I think that, um, if you have enough time, then definitely try it, because the thing is that you're going to have to learn YouTube marketing, all these kinds of things, later on. uh, I'm someone who didn't know anything about content creation up until 2020, and then after COVID hit, all of a sudden found myself in a position where I'm just constantly making content every single day, constantly streaming every single day, and in that process actually fed over into my other businesses. Where now when I'm looking at marketing strategies or going into marketing meetings or even hiring people within marketing, I know exactly what it is that I'm looking for. I'm so much more well versed. I understand, you know, um, you know, I understand insights into, is this a quality decision that I'm making, and then you get the effects of marketing, which then comes into it, which is that when you do good marketing, and you're able to get out there and you're able to understand how to showcase your best, features and things like that, then you see it come back to you, and then it's kind of like you end up creating this cycle where you market, and then marketing brings the interest, and interest, you convert that into sales, then you put it back into your team and back into the marketing, you improve the product, you do more marketing leads to more interest, so on and so forth. So that's the flywheel that you end up creating. So it's a really interesting point. I would recommend everyone to try YouTube in some way, shape, or form. But be responsible about how you try it. Don't go releasing content that will negatively impact you later on. Obviously, try to be responsible with how you use it. But you don't have to publicize everything. You can like
Right.
create unlisted streams and practice yourself and just ask a few people for advice. And then you can learn and you can get better and you can get better. So in terms of that side of things, if you've got a strong enough value that you're channeling people into, then yes. But then you have to make sure that, okay, what is it the thing that I'm channeling these people into? Is it a Patreon? Is it some kind of course? Is it some kind of product that I'm wanting them to buy? What is it? Okay. You got to make sure that's solid. And then what you're then saying is that you're then going to add an entire marketing arm onto that. And then can you execute at the quality you need to execute to attract what it is? So one thing that people don't pay a lot of attention to, and this is actually picking up from our conversation about quality earlier on, Ronak. I'll be interested to get your ideas on this after I mention this point, because we
Right.
were having quite an interesting conversation on it. But when you have, you know, your particular audience impacts the level of quality that you can hit. Okay, like and the level of quality, sorry, the level of quality that you are producing at, it has a massive impact on the type of audience that you're aiming for. So for example, if you are making a high luxury channel where you're showcasing luxury goods and things like that, if you've got it on something which looks like it was filmed on a potato from 2002, and a few other things, that's not going to come across very well. But if the target audience is luxury, then now all of a sudden you're using mirrorless or DSLR cameras, you're using cinema lenses, you've got really high quality microphones, the lighting is correct, you're presenting everything in a really good high quality manner, then your channel, this luxury high lifestyle sort of channel, it'll succeed, because that's what people are looking for. You're showcasing what the value proposition is in the correct way. There are some circumstances where like the level of delivery doesn't matter, because the target audience, maybe it's that you're growing the audience as you grow, and then for other people it's like, I'm gonna, like me personally, it's like I have this quality bar, I always come in at the quality bar
Right.
regardless, because that's just my personal brand. Is I want people to feel confident whenever they see me and things like that, that they feel that they someone that they can trust, which takes care of the details, so I'll take care of them. And this is how I've built up a lot of my companies and a lot of the existing clients and repeat clients that I've got. So this is the reason why I always go for that quality level, because anyone might watch, and I want them to feel that, like, yes, this is someone, it's another reason to keep on doing business with me. But I'd like to hand it over to you. I think see you've been itching to have a comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I really think about as well. Like, how much should I produce in terms of quality content? Should I invest in a really expensive DSLR? Should I get the top level mic? How much of it is really going to give it a value add to my viewership? And I really don't have an answer to that. But I have kind of looked around and listened to different podcasts of people talking about it, especially top level content creators. Some of the things that I've heard from like really well reputed content creators were like when they started initially and they got their fame, they were recording on their phones, basic setup and stuff like that. But as soon as they started transitioning to highly developed and highly produced content, they just noticed a drop in viewership. So I don't think there's kind of an equation of, if you optimize this on quality, your viewership is going to go up. At the end of the day, viewers are watching your content to get engaged and stimulated. If you can keep those two attributes locked in, people are going to watch your video regardless of the quality of
Mm,
camera, or I mean, I guess there has to be a baseline, right? Can you see the person and can you listen to that person? I think once you meet that benchmark and that threshold, it really doesn't matter.
mm. Yeah, I mean, this is something which we can talk on and on about, but um, one thing that I think as well is that what people happen is that when they increase the production values, they often to justify it, actually change the nature of their content,
Right.
which I think
Right.
contributes to the drop in viewership. Because obviously, let's just say like you have 1 million viewers. Let's just use round figures, keep it easy. You have 1 million viewers, and then you've made it big, and then now you're like, okay, now I'm going to really ramp up the production quality and things that we're doing. What then happens is that you know people often to justify it will say that, oh, wait a minute, I can make this type of content now, I can make this type of content, I can make this type of content. Maybe the people, the larger audience that you had, maybe 500,000 of them, were interested in a particular type of content and a particular type of way that you were delivering it, that you're now changing. I think one of the best YouTube channels are ones such as Linus Tech Tips, Unbox Therapy, and MKBHD, for the reason of like when you watch their journey. And like I remember
Right.
watching these channels at the very beginning, and how they've sort of transformed the production quality, and the audience, the content has changed along the way. They've really changed it quite a bit. So one thing that I think it is that, like, are you still delivering the same amount of content? And then when you change your content, it's like when you're changing your product. Like if I'm going to change my product, I first of all understand, I have to understand that who are the people that are using my current product. What is it that they like about the current product? If I were to get rid of these features from my product, would they continue to use my product? And then when I have this new product, how many people will join on because of that? Because there's a loss, there's a movement. You're not going to be able to keep everyone to have 100% transfer rate across it. And you have to view the videos or the different types of videos you make as like product streams or product strands, and then understand the audience from that perspective. And I think that with content, a lot of people fall into the art side of things and don't realize that, like, yeah, there's like some business concepts that you can apply to it, which can really help you understand what it is when you have them shifts.
Right. Like as you kind of well alluded to, like as audiences of content creators, the best part about starting a YouTube channel that's relatively in its infancy is the growth phase of it, right? Like where you see
Definitely.
like Linus Tech Tips, Unbox Therapy, basically in their garages or their college dorms, building out content to like the production that they've got, right? I think these people have still done a good job of increasing production and still creating a really good quality product. But what generally tends to happen is, as you alluded to as well, is that it gets too professionalized, it gets too, boxy, it feels too corporatey. And that's what people don't like. The thing about YouTube relative to traditional television is that it feels that you can connect with that person.
Yeah.
There's not people behind the camera. It's dictated by your own voice and your own intuition. That's why people take mkh mkbhd's opinions on tech products, or lose from Unbox Therapy's opinions on his product, because you feel like he's personally delivering it. There's not a huge production, because that always feels like there's a whole orchestration going behind it. So I don't know, the validity of it, you know. But yeah, you know, I think we had a great conversation on edtech, uh, a good conversation on content creation. Now your latest startup, right? Your latest company that you've launched, Coda's Launchpad. This is super interesting. Do you want to sort of unravel what Coda's Launchpad is and what the purpose of starting another company is?
Yeah, so Coda's Launchpad currently right now is just a community initiative that we're putting together. There's many avenues that can come out of this, but we're just exploring what it is that it's going to be. I was at Jitex at the stand, and I had a lot of people come up to me that are members of Coders HQ, the Coders HQ community, and as you get to talking to them, they find out about my background. They realize, okay, this is someone who is a serial entrepreneur. He has so many different experiences. They start talking to me and asking me for like lots of advice and things like that. And what I found was a common sort of thread between them is that these guys don't understand what it is when you just say launch a company. Like how like with content creation, it's like just start and be consistent, and over time you'll end up having the growth, in terms of the production values and the audience, and your content will get more and more mature, and things. When I say mature, I mean your content evolves to the types of things that you want to do, things like that. It's just like that with a business, like, and I was just like, well, why don't you just start one? You can just make one, and you know I realized that, wait a minute, these guys understanding of a business is different to what I understand a business is. And like, like these guys think that you need to have like a mega corporation. You need to have 40, 50 employees, you need to have coffee machines, you need to have a million dirhams in the bank, all XYZ, all these sorts of things. They don't understand that a startup and what it takes to actually start a startup is actually quite small. So I was there with a few of the people from the Coders HQ that were at the Coders HQ stand, and I just said to them, look, we should do a hackathon event, but show people how to build a SaaS within 24 hours, because that's all it takes to get started. 24 hours, and yes, it's not going to be the perfect product, but you're well on your way to being able to start a business from it. We call it a SaaSathon, and let's put together a workshop. you know from there, I sent a message into the Coders HQ group just saying, guys, I've got this idea of putting something together. A few of us from the Coders HQ stand, we're chatting with each other, we've put this together, so who wants to join? That was 5.5 weeks ago when that conversation was had. It was on the very last Friday, Friday the 20th, I believe, on of October. And from there, it's grown out massively. A lot of us have basically looked at, okay, what is it that we could bring? What's the value that we could bring to the people to show them what it is to do? We've put together a workshop, where people, I don't want to announce what the workshop is over here because I have a specific podcast episode. So youtube.com/@ coders launchpad. If you don't mind the plug, the shameless
Yeah,
plug.
link in the description.
But yeah, but eventually that podcast will be coming out where we talk about the first workshop. But it involves AI ML workflows, and it's showing how a company that has a multi-million-dollar valuation, well into the eight figures in terms of valuation, has produced the product that they've produced. So these guys are going to get to see how to build something from that, how to understand how you start a business, and then we're actively speaking with many people, on how they can support us. Last week, actually, I flew back to Dubai and pitched, along with other members of the Launchpad team, pitched to the Ministry of AI and Coders HQ. They're giving us their full support for Coders Launchpad. Talking about all the different ways that we can promote the entrepreneurial spirit, and really foster an entrepreneurial community from within Coders HQ. So that's something that's really exciting. And yeah, I mean, it's something which I think is going to be truly awesome to see how it's going to transform the community of coders. As you know yourself, Ronak, is that when you're getting people that are constantly creating things, that's where you get the really exciting technical advancements and things like that. So from my perspective, I'm really excited to be able to show people how they can fulfill their dreams and take it a step further.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm super excited. I'm super excited to discuss on how I can get involved to kind of support this initiative. But yeah, I mean, this all circles back to, kind of the starting thing. Your passion for education definitely resonates, whether it's in the tech hardware, the software component of it, and now, sharing your knowledge and your experience in the entrepreneurship arena and trying to, share that knowledge to other people so they can also benefit. So super novel things, I'm always willing to support whatever you're doing. And uh, so, for everyone who's listening to this podcast, I guess who's based in the UAE, is interested in joining Coda's Launchpad, I'll probably have some links in the description. Maybe, Saf, you can share it to me after this podcast.
Yeah.
Any other closing remarks?
No, I just want to say that thank you for having me on the podcast. I had a when you sent me the list of questions, I was actually expecting, or like the topics that you wanted to discuss. I was actually expecting some generic, conversations, like around edtech and things like that. And I was actually really surprised by the depth and the tracks with which you wanted to take the education, content, because I've been in edtech for like 13 years and like no one's had like the perspective that you had over there on it. So I was actually like, I remember like just reading it and being like, wow, like this is really good, this is really unique, I can talk about things in a different light. So I want to say thank you very much for calling me on and for having thought out a way of speaking about edtech that not a lot of people will have, put on, and I think some of it's for, good reason as well. But, that's something which I think is truly valuable. And, I can't wait to see what it is that you're going to do further on the, podcast scene. Destination Big Leagues, I had a look at it and I thought to myself that, I had a look at the content, had to listen to everything before I came on so I could understand what it is, what is the type of value that you want the listeners to have. And I do believe that this is wholly packed out with value from top to bottom. So I hope that, if there's anyone that's listening from my side of things, I'd say definitely give Ronak a follow, Ronak, and I'll definitely introduce you to some people that I think would be very good to have on your podcast. I think you're a very good interviewer, and I can't wait to actually see this thing, how you grow this thing and how you take it, especially with what you're saying with the vision that you've got for it and things like that, and the growth mindset behind it. So thank you very much for having me, and thanks to your listeners as well, all the listeners actually, for giving myself the time, at the time of day to listen to my thoughts and my ramblings on certain things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those kind words. Really appreciate it. Awesome, Seth. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
No, no, it's thank you, thanks everyone, bye.